Welcome to the Beacon Encourage, powered by Beacon Life Church. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. This is Beacon Encourage, your weekly dose of courage.
A very, very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. What a great joy to be coming your way yet again. This is yours truly, Dr. M.D. Desire from the Beacon Encourage. We are powered by Beacon Life Church. As you know, we always come your way every week to bring you a story, somebody's journey, and to, someone to tell the story of their lives and their journey with the Lord, and how the Lord has taught them and instructed them and translated them into some amazing and inspiring things. Today we are down here in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and I can't tell you how elated I am and overjoyed to be seated with a dear friend of mine for the last number of years, doing some amazing things with the Discipling Nations Alliance, and I'm so delighted to be bringing him your way. Ladies and gentlemen, receive with me Dwight Vogt. I don't know if I pronounce your name right.
It's correct. You've got it, Dwight Vogt. That's exactly right.
Wonderful. So delighted to have you on the Beacon Encourage.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm going to start right at the beginning because many of them are meeting you for the first time. Dwight, take a moment to talk to us about who Dwight Vogt is.
Dwight Vogt is the son of Leonard.
Yes.
My father was a pastor, and I grew up in the United States in
Yes,
the
sir.
Northwest region, Oregon.
Yes, sir.
I'm a twin, identical twin.
Oh, wow.
I have a brother who's an engineer, and married.
Yes.
Have 3 children, all adults, grown up, out of
Yes.
the home.
Yes.
And I work now for the DNA and have been the Disciple Nations Alliance for the last since 2011. That's when I joined.
Amazing. Amazing. I know that a little bit in your history, you have a number of years in the corporate world working with a non-profit, the Food for the Hungry. How do you talk to us a little bit about that and how that affected and impacted your life, and how the translation is happening, how Food for the Hungry for you is connected with what you're doing today,
Okay.
Discipling Nations?
Wow, that's. I'll try to keep it short.
Yes.
That's a story for me.
Yes.
When I was in college, I dreamt of going to the Philippines or another country just to take a year. I think they call it a gap year in
Yes.
England, and it was just to see and learn and experience another culture, and that was a desire of my heart. But I thought, I'll end up in the United States, and I'll probably be a pastor like my father. When I was in college, I got the opportunity to go on a summer mission. We went to the Caribbean. Of all places, if you know the Caribbean, it's a place of white sand and beaches and great snorkeling. And we did ministry in some housing projects, and it was just a great experience. That first experience, and people basically that were in leadership kept inviting me to join other opportunities.
Yes.
And it was more of their invitation than it was even my desire. I just thought, if you're inviting me to go on this trip and you think I can contribute, I will go.
Yes.
And one thing led to another, and my senior year, I led a team of students to Thailand to work in refugee camps.
Yes.
And I stayed. And I worked with that organization for almost 30 years.
Wow.
It's called Food for the Hungry.
Oh, Food for the
Does relief and development work
Yes.
globally. And I worked in Thailand and Bangladesh and Peru, a little bit in Guatemala, and covered all kinds of different relief programs and stuff like that. So that became my life. And,
Quite a profile, I'd say.
yeah, it was. And you asked, how did I get?
Yes.
Where did I get to this
Yes,
point?
yes.
And working with poverty, we always had what we thought we had solutions.
Yes.
Do this project, do that project, and we did those projects well. And we were working with people in each country that had solutions, and they applied those. But I always had this sense of, what does the culture have to do with this? What's the impact of the culture here?
Yes.
And I was influenced by my friend Daryl Miller,
Yes.
who you know well.
Yes.
And I remember we were doing discussions at lunch at work one day, and he shared an article with me by a guy named Michael Novak.
Yes.
And basically the article was on why is Latin America not as wealthy as the United States? And I thought, why isn't it? Because I've been in Latin America. There's so many resources, so much beauty and wonderful people. And Michael Novak traced it back to the impact of the Spanish conquistadors who brought Catholic religion and that tradition to Latin America. And then it was contrasted with Protestant bringing it to the United States. And the contrast of Catholic and colonization, and it was mind-blowing. I thought, so there's something here that's not just, it didn't just happen. Something changed. Something was different in the United States and in, like, say, Bolivia. And that started getting me to thinking about culture, on my own culture and the culture of other countries, and the impact that has.
Wow. Amazing. And that leads us into the DNA. I know that right now you are Vice President, and there are many things that DNA as a fraternity is doing around the world with different ministries and different outreaches, and talk to us a little bit, in your own opinion, the impact of the alliance around the world.
Well, to me it's a privilege, because the DNA is just, as an organization it's 7 people.
Yes.
But as a movement, it's thousands. And we see our little job in Phoenix is just how do we help encourage and spur the work and ideas and teaching of lots of other people around the world, like yourself. And so I was really excited working at Food for the Hungry, and I knew the DNA was on the other side of town, and all my friends with Daryl and Scott, who you've heard about, they were there, and Scott finally said, Dwight, would you join us? And would you come serve here with the DNA? And I had a good paying job. My kids were in college. I needed to have good work to pay for their college. And Scott said, well, you're going to have to raise support here. And I'm thinking, I can't raise support at my age. And it's not, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here in Phoenix. But I felt God say, yeah, that's what I should do. So my wife and I, we went off on that, took a job with the DNA. But in terms of impact, that's your story to tell. I just, we're excited whenever people can see the impact of what we call the biblical worldview in their vocations, in their ministries, in their schools. And that's why this week, with all of these people gathered, I'm really excited just to hear the stories of different people, of how they've been impacted by seeing God's worldview on how the world should be, and how He's planned it, and how He's intended us to live, and how He will help us live that out, and the impact that has in our daily lives.
It's absolutely impressive, and we are all looking forward to the conference beginning tonight. But maybe if you could take a moment and talk to us about some of those very core foundational values and understanding. We talk about the biblical worldview or the kingdom mind.
Right.
For someone who is hearing that for the first time, how do you break that down for them, and maybe a little bit of what this movement entails?
Okay. Well, breaking a little bit down would be a lot, but I'll tell you what's impacted me. Our friend Daryl again, my mentor, he talks about Genesis 1 Christians and Genesis 3 Christians. And I go, what is that about? And of course, the Genesis 3 Christian starts with, where do we begin? Man is sinful, the world is fallen, we need to be saved. That's true. And then I ask, well, what is a Genesis 1 Christian? He says, a Genesis 1 Christian looks at the world and says, what did God actually intend at the beginning? What did He design us to be? What did we fall from that now He wants to save us to? And so that just got me thinking, to the extent that after a period of years I ended up writing a little book that I called Made to Flourish. And basically the idea there is I looked at Genesis 1 and saw just how amazingly clear God's plan is for the world that He created, the earth and its people, to thrive and team and flourish and grow and really be something very, very beautiful. And such that He would step back every day and say, wow, I did really good work that day. This is really good. And then at the end, what does He say? He says, it's very good, And
Yes.
the surprising thing is, and I'll talk about this tomorrow, it's like when he said very good, his last thing he did was to create you and I,
Yes.
and Christine,
Yes.
and say, now I'd like to put you in charge of this place.
Yes.
He says, I'm the ruler, but now I'm going to rule through you.
Yes.
You're in charge now. And, wow, what a job we've been given.
What a job.
What a task. Of course, we blew it.
Yes.
Sin came into the world, and all the corruption and sickness and disease and brokenness. But no words to say, and God changed his mind.
Yes.
He no longer intends for us to rule and to create and to create the world that he intended it to be. He never changed that. And so I think, what does that mean for me today? That I can continue to live and be the way God created us to be. And what would that look like?
Wow.
So
Wow.
that inspires me.
Beautiful.
That inspires
Beautiful.
me.
Beautiful. I know you talk about that book, but I know that you're an author in your own right.
Well, I did write one little book called Made to Flourish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is what you've just broken down for
Yeah,
us.
a little bit. Yeah, it's the first chapter.
I know that. Most of us have read the Discipling of Nations.
Discipling Nations by Darrell.
The Nurturing Nations.
Yeah.
And some of the others there. I know that there is amazing material that should be recommended out there, and you understand that book table very well. Talk to us a little bit about some of that available material and where some of that could be found.
Yeah, there's between Scott and Darrell especially, and Bob Moffat, other co-founders.
Yes.
Darrell, of course, wrote his first book was Discipling Nations, which he actually wrote while he was working with Food for the Hungry as a relief and development worker.
Wow.
And he was inspired in that world to write that book about how culture impacts, poverty in our lives so much. Another great book is Life Work, also
Life
written by
Work,
Darrell,
yes.
which looks at vocation.
Yes.
And what is God's plan for my vocation, no matter what it is, and how should I unfold my vocation in a way that brings what God intended to be.
Yes.
What's another great book? Scott just wrote a book on social justice,
Yes.
which looks at really, I don't know what's going on in your country, but in ours, there's a movement to basically put people into groups and say this group is good and this group is bad. This group is a victim of this group,
Yes.
and it really becomes a power struggle. It's not about
Strife.
how can we help each other
Yes.
become the people God created us to be, but how can we get power and get
Yes.
out of it's a power struggle between groups, whether
Yes.
it's men and women or blacks and whites, or
Yes.
so another one
There are
is
also some beautiful books by Yeoman.
by
Elizabeth Yeoman.
Elizabeth
Humans.
Humans. Yeah, I haven't read Elizabeth. I had the privilege of sitting under Elizabeth
Okay.
for a week and was blown away by her understanding of education and just the value of educating our children
Yes.
to first of all know God who He is, but also His intentions. I remember she unpacked, I remember she said this. She said, God is the author of math. In fact, He created the world using math.
Yes.
And I thought, God's language is math, and He spoke math into the creation. And yet, when I studied science, it was all math. And I'm going, she's right. He's a mathematician. He actually speaks the language of math in creating this incredibly complex, beautiful world.
Yes.
And I just looked at math as 2 + 2 = 4, and, good, I can do something with that. But,
Yes.
So she enlightened my eyes to the whole area of education.
Wow. Beautiful stuff there.
Yeah.
On the question of mentoring younger leaders and kind of like flourishing those that are picking the baton from the elders, because I see Darrell, for example, and Bob. They've been running for decades, like you're saying, and it's great that we have volumes written and things that the rest of us can read and keep running. But as an organization, what do you see from a leadership point of view, and what are some of the things that you are doing to keep pouring among the young people? I know that part of that is what moved us to host Darrell in Kenya.
Yeah, with the gatherings that you
gathered,
hosted.
some young people there, and it was amazing. what that looks like from the DNA perspective.
Well, I think our role in this is to try to support, again, you and others that are saying we would like to get these messages to the younger generation.
Yes.
And I think especially if we have some DNA Alliance members in Latin America,
Yes.
and they, led by a lady named Yarley, they hold conferences just about every year. During COVID, it was all online, but before that, and now it's in person.
Yes.
And for our part, we can bring Daryl, we can bring
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
just to speak at those. But the organization and much of the training is being done by Bolivians and Peruvians and Guatemalans, Colombians, in terms of and the infection is really from the young people to the young people. I mean, I'm looking at my own kids who are adult, in their 20s and 30s.
Yes.
They don't use my language, but they understand worldview.
That's true.
And they understand the biblical
The message is the
worldview.
same.
And in their own way, they're communicating.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I've been really pleased. Scott Allen has a son, Luke, that
Yes.
I've watched as a baby grow up, and now he's working with us. And it's so fun to watch him because he's in his 20s. He understands that whole generation and how to relate, and just how he relates on social media and with videographers, just in a
Yes.
whole nother way that can communicate. And that's exciting.
Wow, that's true.
Because the future is
That's true.
not us.
Yes.
Well, maybe you, but not me. You're a young man,
If I may ask you, Dwight, on a very personal note, I know that when we talk about your journey with the Lord, there are many things that the Lord has done in your life. I call it the testimony question. If there is one or two things that are always for you a point of reference, that you remember that was a watermark, when the Lord did this or did that or turned this around, and you always look to that point as a game changer.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
Well, I think of two. One is God's faithfulness.
Yes.
I always understood that we're God's feet and God's hands, but I didn't always understand how much God really does want to work through His people.
Yes.
We tend to say, "God, do this for me," and then somebody else comes and does it, and you go, "Well, they did it, not God." And no, God did that.
Yes.
God sent that person. I remember once. This is really small, but we actually lost a child to a heart problem, and our second-born died in surgery shortly after.
Sorry about that.
Terrible grief. We never expected it. Traumatic. Took us a while to come through. But I remember one time we were struggling because I was out of work. We were struggling with some poverty, severe poverty at the time. And this older couple came to our door with a basket of food and some cash and just a simple thing. And for some reason, God's in that word, He said, "I sent these people to you. I am going to provide for you. I'm going to take care of you, Dwight. I'm going to take care of you, Deborah." And it was a simple thing, an older couple. And it wasn't them coming from their church and getting a list of needy families. It was just God said, "I'm going to take care of you." And here He shows up in these two people.
Amazing.
And I finally realized that's how He works.
Amazing.
So you and I, He works through you and I.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
So.
Oh yes. He shows up all the time, and we bless the Lord for that. I wanted to ask the question of. I mean, this is 2022. We've just come through the whole lockdown situation around the world, and COVID and its impact, and lost a lot of loved ones and people we knew. And I mean, we all know what it's been like. But when you look forward in the next decade, in the next 10 years, you're looking at 2030 and beyond. What do you see in almost like a prophetic sense?
Whoa, prophetic sense. I've been captured by Ezekiel 47 recently, and I'll talk about that tomorrow.
Yes.
But I'm troubled, very troubled by my country and by the direction we're headed as a country, and it just pains me and causes me no shortage of grief. But I look at Ezekiel 47 and I see a river that was ankle deep, and then it becomes knee deep, and then it becomes waist deep, and then Ezekiel says it became a river I could not swim across because it was so deep. And the trees continue to grow on both sides of the river, and it just multiplies. And I'm thinking that is the church now and in the future. This river will continue to multiply, and it won't be, maybe governments won't change, but there will be like thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people like you and I living their lives before Christ and saying, how can I share His goodness, His blessing, His truth with those around me? And so you'll have all these little pockets, thousands of little, millions of little pockets, and the world won't even see it, but they'll experience it because, and I mean, it happened to me recently. I met somebody in a training at the airport, of all things, and such a kind person. And so, turns out I found out through Jessie that she goes to her church, and I'm like, we met here at an airport. Didn't have any idea she was a Christian, but I knew there was something special about her. And she was a believer, you know. And that's the future. It's believers living out their faith
and lighting up everyone
in a dark world. But you know, the tares and the wheat, the wheat will continue to grow, and we have to be a part of that. So,
wow, wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking to Dwight Vaught from here in Addis Ababa. We are privileged to be here and spend some time with him and the whole DNA family, and what a joy and what a pleasure. In light of what you've just shared, Dwight, what do you see the role of family as intended from the beginning, fitting into the big picture of God's grand scheme of things? I'm sure that whatever God is doing in the church, we cannot separate from what is happening in the family. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think that it's the battleground. Yeah, the family is the battleground. I think on two levels. One is not creating families. You know, I have a daughter who's 35 now, and she's single, and I'm just like pleading with God. You know? It's like, surely there's a man out there that will love my daughter and give her a family, you know. And I want to believe that's God's will for her, but if it isn't, that's fine too. But just the creation of families is so important. And I kind of see young men struggling with making those commitments because I don't know what bill of goods they've been sold, but it's a major challenge to take on raising a family. And but it's the best. It's the best. Anyway, so I just feel like creating families and then trust, really, you need God to actually live this out as a family. There are so many pressures on the family today. But I look at my friends who are raising kids and teenagers and the challenges of social media, and I just, oh, God bless you. I'm glad I didn't have to raise children today that you're going through today. And I just
like
go,
a different ballgame altogether.
It's a different ballgame, and I have friends that one guy I meet with every week, and he tells me about what his daughter's going through and the challenges she's facing, and he's just working with her to help her walk through this. So that Satan wants to destroy the family at all levels, I think, and yet but that's still where it's at, you know. So
it is what it is.
It's where it is, you know. It's the number one institution.
That's true.
You know, Mark said if we can destroy the family, we can basically destroy everything. You know?
From the foundation.
So, anyway, God bless the family.
Wonderful. God bless the family. I want you to take a moment looking in that camera, or maybe this camera.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want you to just take a moment and give a word of encouragement, Dwight, because on the other side of the camera are people that are discouraged in many ways, probably despondent over issues. Some of them are struggling with their relationship with the Lord. And we call this the Beacon Encourage because every now and then we need that those to just be encouraged and lifted again. And I want you to do exactly that, taking your time in a few minutes to give a word of encouragement to someone watching.
Okay. Wow, I think of John's, I think it's 7:37. Jesus, the last day of the feast, he was going to be crucified. And he's standing up in the temple. It's the last day of the feast, and he cries out in a great, loud voice, and he says, if you're thirsty, come to me and drink. And I think that's the answer for today is, you know, we've got water here and I'm going to have a drink after we're done here.
Yes.
And he's saying, come and drink and be filled with my spirit and my life for you and drink deeply. And so that's what I would encourage you to do.
Drink and drink deeply. The lady, I remember the Samaritan lady in John chapter number 4.
Right.
Who he tells, if you drink of the water that I give, you will never thirst again.
Never thirst again.
Never thirst again. There is such a thing that the Lord satisfies your heart and satisfies your soul, that you'll never have to thirst again. And then again begins right at the beginning to receive from Him and to drink from Him.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Take a moment, Dwight, and just pray for those that are watching and just speak a word of
All
blessing.
right. Father, thank you for my friend here. I pray for him and his ministry, but I pray for all those that are watching or listening. God, that you would help each one of us know what it is that you have for us.
Yes, Lord.
And that this day, this moment, this hour, you would pour your life into ours. And by your grace, give us all that we need to live an overcoming life. You promise that those who are faithful will overcome. So help us to be overcomers by your grace and by your faith, by your Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.
We say amen to that. We say amen and thank you, Lord. Thank you so much, Dwight, for sharing a little bit of your story and taking time to meet with us here at the Beacon Encourage. I do believe that you have been blessed hearing Dwight's story, and I hope that some of the things that he said will not leave you the same again, but challenge you to love the Lord more, pour yourself to Him and His kingdom work, and have that wonderful worldview of the Word of God, the biblical worldview, the worldview of the kingdom. We love you and we celebrate you. This is the Beacon Encourage. Remember, we walk by faith and not by sight. Until we see you this time next week, stay bold and stay strong as a beacon shining Jesus light wherever you are. God bless you. We love you, and bye-bye.